Too
kick
early
this off
to
just a
play.
few minutes later than 6:30, but that's all right. We've got everybody here. First, we have the interlocal agreement with Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, POs regarding 6650 West 47th Terrace, KCKS, BestDrive, tire store.
Thank you. Schatz Distributing Building. There's a new tenant interested in using the building. Their proposed use is fine in mission, but requires a special use permit in the Unified Government. And rather than making the applicant go through both jurisdictions for zoning approvals, sign approvals, building inspection approvals, all of those, we've decided to come to an agreement with UG and let them enforce their rules since they are stricter in this case and on the zoning side. We have the same building codes and the same proactive nuisance code enforcement as the UG, so really this is letting them take control just for this property, just for the duration of this particular use, which would be covered by a special use permit in the UG. So this interlocal agreement is just a formal agreement between our two jurisdictions to allow that to happen.
A lot of people here didn't even know that building was ours.
Yeah.
Or down here on our property, in our city.
I would like to put a contingency in place that they pay for that bridge that we paid for that belongs to them.
12 years, right?
Exactly.
So, any questions for Danielle?
How much money is that, Debbie? How much do they owe us on that?
The whole bridge. We did it for safety, so people coming in the mission wouldn't get hurt falling through the bridge. But it's their bridge. A lot of money.
But a lot of it people use it, so.
I agree, but it was, I think, $13 million project, as I recall.
13 million?
But there was a lot of federal dollars.
If you can get it, you get a percent.
Yeah, collector's fee.
I will say the proposed use is a commercial truck tires shop, basically the changing out of tires and alignments.
I make a recommendation we take it to council.
Thanks.
Okay.
Consent?
Yeah.
Okay. Second, we've got Fox Ridge Drive Phase 1, award construction contract.
Thank you, RC. On April 28th, we opened bids for the Fox Ridge project, 56th Street, 51st Street. We had 6 bidders, with Kansas Heavy Construction being the low bid, at $1,088,152.99. Engineer's estimate on that project was $1.39 million, so about $300,000 below the engineer's estimate. The contract says that they have 90 working days to complete the project. We're hoping to start the project in June. Be happy to answer any questions that any of you guys have regarding this action.
One thing that we have recommended, and you'll see in the recommendation, in your action item summary, is the contractor's bid did not include a contingency or force account on the project, and we typically want to do that. We set the contingency account of about 10% of the total contract. We don't expect that we'll have to spend that. But you'll see the motion was written to authorize both the acceptance of Kansas Heavy Construction's bid and the contingency force account. And you have a council policy which dictates change order authority on the project that we follow on our capital projects.
Good job. Get that thing done.
We need it for sure.
Recommendation?
I recommend we take it to council, but not on my consent.
Next, we've got this water repair solution at 49th Street. John again.
We should have construction inspection services for Fox Ridge, item number 3.
Sorry. Yeah, inspection services contract.
Yes. This task order there's a task order from Olson Associates in the amount of $111,112.50 to provide full-time inspection, materials testing on the Fox Ridge project. We also got a scoping fee from GBA, our other on-call engineer. They were $116,000, so we are recommending that we move forward with Olson Associates in this amount. Again, the contract's based on those 90 working days. We anticipate that we can get it done faster than that. So with these inspection services, we will only get billed for the time actually used. We asked them both to turn in their scope and fee based on the 90 days that was in the contract.
And 50% of construction inspection costs are eligible reimbursement expenses through the CARS program, along with 50% of the construction.
Is there anything to mention about doing away with cars or limiting or changing percentages or anything on that?
Not at this time. That program actually is running really well. I mean, it's really smooth every time you go to meetings. Not a lot of action, so usually little nuisance, good news. So, yeah. It's an awesome program.
I recommend we use council.
All right.
Not on consent.
All right, next we have Fox Ridge Drive Phase 1, Arsenal Interlocal Agreement.
This is the interlocal agreement with Johnson County for using the CARS program funding. The amount that we are receiving from the county is an amount not to exceed $725,000 a year, and that's 50% of eligible construction and construction and inspection costs.
We actually anticipate, based on the contract prices that we received, that we will be eligible to be reimbursed for less than $725,000, but would be up to that. It's a little confusing with that max, but that's the ceiling.
Are we marrying the utilities with that project, or if there are any?
We're not. This project actually, we avoid a lot of the utilities because we're actually bringing the roadway in to accommodate the sidewalks and the pavement. The only real concern that we'd have with utilities is with the stormwater, which there's already stormwater in place, so we'll probably be clear of most of those utilities. There is overhead power through there. That does not anticipate putting that power underground. That's a pretty expensive venture. And if we were to do that, typically KCKS has us do that on our dime. It's not really the same as with typical other projects when you have utilities in the right of way. They are required to move or relocate, kind of like we did with Johnson Drive with the water mains, the force mains, stuff like that. Anything that's in the right of way, they have to move at their expense, but the underground power, that would be something that they'd ask us to pay for.
All right, thank you.
Well,
Take it, Ken.
All right.
Not on the consent.
Last action item is stormwater repair solutions at 49th Street.
at the property at 6341 West 49th Street, it's there off that dead end cul-de-sac off of Lamar. The homeowner has contacted us, and she's had issues with, during moderate to heavy storm events, water running from the properties behind her down through her yard and into her house.
That's not the one that goes to a B and then it sits down, because we've worked on that property before. That's one of those.
This one, I think that's the one.
There's really no curb or any kind of guttering, and it's just, it's like this big along the cement before it gets to the yard, and it just flows, and it's the same one. I'm just wondering.
I don't think it is. It's there if you go down Lamar, there's a dead end street where Lawrence Andre lives on the corner. It's kind of up on the hill. There's a little horseshoe right there. It's the house that sits right there. And the water comes from actually up in like 4900 and Apollo.
To the west, yeah.
Right. The 49th Street runs down, and it basically just stops right behind that property. And there's a green space with an area inlet. The area inlet is on city property. And then there's a 12-inch corrugated metal pipe that runs out of that inlet and between the two houses there and down to in front of the house on that 49th Street, there's a curb inlet that sets out next to the road, and that curb inlet does not have an outlet pipe. So basically, I have water running into it.
And
The inlet fills up, and then the water runs over land down to the two inlets at Lamar and 49th Street.
Right.
So it's a very strange setup. And just initially looking at it, it looks as if that house was built in the old roadbed. So essentially, water had been made to flow there. The houses were built, and the stormwater infrastructure was put there to try to mitigate that problem. And I think it's just to the point now that it's overwhelmed, and during those moderate to heavy storm, the inlet will back up and then essentially run through the back of her property. So instead of running through the pipe, now it's running overland, and it's actually getting into her house.
Could I ask that when it comes back for consideration, that you bring us some pictures so we have a visualization of what we're looking at?
In the packet, I can get better pictures too, but this might help explain. DBA has a drawing at the end of their scope and feed.
Isn't that getting in there next to a neighbor's house too?
No, just hers.
Really?
Yeah. And we haven't had any issues with the next door neighbor.
Unless the corrugated pipe thing gets plugged up at the top, a lot of times that happens.
And it
It
seems
kind of
to be,
cascades back over into his yard.
well, it seems to be kind of, just isolated to her yard.
Really?
Where that fence is, runs along the fence and along the house. And
But it is a weird setup.
it's a
on
very
it.
strange setup. We looked through our records to see if, when, how it was put together. I wasn't able to find anything. But it looked like they may have built the house and then after the fact found that, there was a lot of water running through there. So they attempted to do this to try to mitigate some of that water running through the property and get it underground. With that curb inlet kind of, for lack of a better term, being an inlet to nowhere. When it gets overwhelmed and backs up, now that starts backing everything back up the pipe, and it just can't handle that. But on that diagram, if you look at the far left on the west side,
Right.
that road dead ends there, and that area inlet's there where that green line starts. So then that pipe is shown by that green line that runs in between those two houses. And then where that green line stops is where that curb inlet is that fills up.
Right.
As the water fills up, it starts dumping out onto the road and then basically runs down the road to 49th and Lamar, to where there's two curb inlets there that drop into the creek that runs parallel to Lamar.
Is there a possibility when GBA gives you whatever they give you back, is there a potential for you to, we would definitely help this person no matter what, but for instance, explain how many other properties this would protect by doing this pipe? It won't just be one, it's basically protection for that whole.
Sure.
For several of them, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know why this wasn't addressed years ago, honestly, because they've brought it up several times before. Maybe not the same lady, but I'm not sure.
She moved in, it's been maybe a year and a half.
Oh, okay, yeah, people before.
Yeah, she's new to the property, but
That's good.
Probably gave up, yeah, probably gave up.
Moved out.
We've got a lot of rain the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah, we have. Yeah, I get it.
But with this scope, the intent is to get some options out on the table to figure out exactly what we can do to help mitigate this problem. And it's kind of a unique situation because we basically own the inlet structures at both ends, and then the pipe runs on private property.
Okay, the things that we're not replacing, is there rusting or anything on the rest of the parameter that would cause us to maybe reconfigure
I think
the structure?
GBA is going to look at that too. In my mind, she's initial approach at it, you can't have a curb inlet that doesn't have an outlet pipe.
Right.
No.
Right.
They gotta tie that, the one that's coming down between the houses, and
Right.
that curb inlet, go under the street and out to that 49, or,
Down to the,
Lamar, yeah.
right. So I mean, that's
yeah, that's crazy.
a 30,000-foot view of what really needs to happen there. But they'll be sure to explore all the options.
Right, like if there's anything around there, I think it's kind of good to not look at just one scenario, but, okay, if the pipe 2 feet over is rusting out, look, we need a parameter, to me, vision of what we're looking at.
Right.
Not only for cost, but for purposes of not having to replace that
Right.
6 months down the line.
And we'll be sure that they take all that stuff into account. Absolutely.
John, you don't have any kind of ballpark figure what you estimate it might cost?
Not at this time, just because I'm not exactly sure what the
What they're gonna
end
look like.
product's gonna really look like.
So what we're just approving is the design and the survey services.
Correct.
So I say take it to council.
I second that.
And it can go on the consent.
Okay.
Ooh, exciting. All right.
Thank you.
Discussion items, we have zoning code text amendments. Ms. Danielle?
So this is on your discussion items, should sort of not be as confusing as last time we talked about zoning code text changes. It's coming to you from the planning commission, so it'll be on your legislative agenda this month. These are changes to a section of our zoning code that have to do with planned zoning districts. We anticipate there's going to be several developments that come through the planning process this year that will make requests under this section for something called a deviation. It's a slight change from the conventional zoning district rules where they're being developed. When we looked at that section, just kind of refresh our memory what it said, our land use attorney, Pete Heaven, said, you know, the standards that this section calls for you to use to review these kinds of applications are not the right standards to be using. They're the exact same wording as a variance, which is a totally different animal, different case law regarding that. We really need to refresh the section and make sure it's in good shape before we get any applicants who come through this process, so that we have a code section that's clearly defensible and rational. So what we're asking for here and what we presented to the planning commission were the code changes that our land use attorney recommended to us that would still provide a set of criteria to evaluate requests for deviations, but that were different standards than the ones that our code had initially adopted. I can tell you a little bit more about planned zoning districts if you want to know about them. They're in our zoning code. They've been there a long time. They were kind of the predecessor to some of the more innovative zoning standards that cities started adopting in the early 2000s. It's still a good thing to keep in our code. It's still a relevant code section. We just want to make sure that it's clear and does what we want it to do before we have to make any use of it coming up in the next couple of years. And I will say the planning commission did conduct a public hearing and did make a unanimous recommendation to you, so that'll be what's on your agenda.
That will be coming up on our agenda. Okay. I believe we just discussed that one.
All right.
Marty, that'd be a good time to talk about the planning commission.
Sure. I know there were some questions with the change that we made at the last council meeting with when the zoning code text changes came through for the sign code. And then the council voted to make some changes actually related to commercial real estate signs. And so the piece that dealt with the fees, which is the part that you ended up waiving as the council, was done by resolution, which is not an action that's taken by the planning commission. So that's completely within your purview. And I think and Susie had asked some questions about that, the planning commission had not specifically discussed that issue because it was really brought to light the day of, or kind of the day before it was coming forward to you all for consideration. And so I think Susie's question was having a comfort level potentially with then not having something that had been vetted or even the planning commission had an opportunity to discuss. They wouldn't have made a recommendation to you on the fees specifically. So if there's any,
Well, my biggest concern was, I'm not so sure that some of the council members realize what we have, the options we have for funds or sending it back to the planning commission, because we do have rules on that. And I just thought maybe that might be a good time to address that so that the new council people know that what we're supposed to do.
So you have, and you're much more familiar with this, so on a plan to override,
So when you have something that comes to you with a recommendation from the planning commission, you have set rules about what you can do with it. Basically, if you're concurring with the planning commission, it's a straight majority vote. But to go the opposite direction of the planning commission recommendation, whatever it is, requires a supermajority vote. And so in this case, the item that you were altering was not something that was coming to you from the planning commission with a recommendation, since it was just the resolution that addressed the fee structure.
But if you have a planning commission item that comes, I mean, I don't know whether they know that we have the options, what we're supposed to do. I guess that's where I'm coming from.
so you can send it back.
So you can
If you don't think you have a supermajority, so you can uphold the planning commission's recommendation. It takes a supermajority, which would be 6 votes, to override or do something different than the planning commission's recommendation, or you have the opportunity to send it back to the planning commission for further discussion.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have the plan review and inspection services. Status update.
Okay, we talked to you all back in January about the fact that Johnson County Department of Planning Codes would no longer be providing plan review and inspection services for us. They've been doing that on a contractual basis for several years due to some retirements at the senior level in the department, some reorganization. And they thought that this would be the time to cancel that agreement, given the limited staff that they had. So with that, we reached out to a local non-for-profit organization. They're actually a national non-for-profit organization known as the Institute for Building Technology and Safety, or IBTS. But they have formed a local branch within the last couple of years under the auspices of Mark. They were created several years ago at the national level. It's kind of an opportunity to provide code review and inspection services for states and counties and cities across the nation that were kind of struggling with maintaining those services, especially in light of situations like hurricanes. That's kind of where they came to fruition, was during Hurricane Katrina, when a lot of the areas of Louisiana were just overwhelmed with devastation and corresponding rebuilding after that. So they kind of came in and thought this would be an opportunity to sort of take that model and make it national. We've been working with them for about 3 months now. They had one staff member that was assigned to us. I think they have 2 now, is that right, Danielle?
3.
Up to 3, okay. So we're keeping pretty busy. They're not full-time employees. I think all of them are retired or semi-retired. For folks that have experience in plan review and inspection services. One was a building official with the city of St. Joe for many, many years, retired, and he's just kind of doing this sort of part-time retirement job, long commute. We have also reached out to the city of Overland Park. We thought that it might be kind of an ideal situation if we could utilize their services like we had done with Johnson County. It just seemed ideal since they were a neighboring community of ours and we're close. There's not a lot of driving distance for their employees. They have a lot of similar housing stock and commercial development. They're familiar with a lot of the agencies that we work with, like Consolidated Fire District Number 2, and Johnson County Wastewater, and Water One, and those organizations. We had some preliminary discussions with them, and we were kind of learning about their processes, and they were learning about us. I think Danielle and I were a little surprised that for a city of their size and as much activities they have going on right now, they only have 2 full-time building inspectors. So I think what happened was that during the recession, when construction really slowed down, they found themselves having to lay off some of their employees. So that forced them just to kind of do a complete reorganization of how they do business. So the vast majority of their business, it sounds like it's done over the counter. people to simply bring in their plans. They're reviewed by a plan reviewer or an inspector there in the office and signed off on and person sent on their way. And I think that's kind of the level they're expecting from us, that we just send our citizens down to Overland Park City Hall, and they do over the counter. They don't do the level of inspections that we do, such as like hot water heaters, fences, roofs, things like that. They were a little bit intrigued by the fact that we do roofing permits. They would kind of like to get into that. I think they're kind of struggling with staffing and so forth and time commitments involved with that.
Is there a list of things that they do?
Yeah, we can provide that. So, the discussions have been slow, admittedly. I think they got really busy with construction season. They had a little fire recently. That took up a lot of their time, so. But we did connect a couple weeks ago, about a week ago in fact, and they said they are working on a report that they want to present back to their department leadership and kind of discuss options. So we're still on their radar screen. We've discussed internally the thought of maybe hiring a full-time building inspector. I think what that would look like and how that would feel, we're kind of struggling with right now. To find somebody that has all the certifications that we'd be looking for and the experience, that person's going to be really high demand. People like that are really hard to find, and they'd probably be pretty expensive, frankly, by the time you factor in benefits and all of that. But we're thinking about going ahead and just kind of formulating an ad and putting it out there and seeing what kind of response we get. So we want to discuss that idea with you. That would be an added position. Which kind of give us an indication of who's out there in the marketplace. We have heard that from a number of different building officials that there's just not a lot of folks out there these days that are doing building inspections or code review. Just for whatever reason, kind of a dying art. A lot of people are retiring. In fact, that's what Overland Park is facing. We got a number of staff. They'll be retiring in the next few years. And they're a little bit worried about finding people to backfill those positions.
So where do people come from? Big municipalities like Kansas City, Missouri, and St. Louis?
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully you get somebody with experience from one of the bigger cities or a county, or maybe an agency. I don't think there's too many of those folks in the private sector.
Yeah.
There might be somebody who's building experience in the private sector working for a construction company.
Do we have an idea in the last 3 to 5 years how many building permits have been assigned? There's that type of data that would be, I mean,
Yeah, we have that data. Do you have a rough idea off the top of your head, Danielle?
We do about 400 permits a year, and it's pretty consistent volume. Valuation, the value of the projects that we get, commercial is very spiky. So a big commercial project will load 1 year up to be a big value year, and then there'll be a pause. Residential has been pretty darn consistent even through the recession, and it's slowly trending upwards consistently over the last 5 to 7 years. Commercial is also fairly consistent if you kind of factor out those big spikes in.
do you have to have separate credentials to do commercial
Yes.
versus residential? So you would want someone that had both, correct?
Ideally,
I've been
yeah.
thinking about all of the options.
Yeah.
There are ways to split services between in-house staff and then still rely on maybe an IBTS to do some of the supplemental plan reviews, or another agency that might do some supplemental work if we had a year with a lot of construction in it. Some of these big apartment complexes maybe are happening all at once. Other big projects might have special staff just assigned to them. So we could take a blended approach too.
But I think I think when we first talked about this last fall, Roland Park had just hired a building inspector position, Prairie Village had hired, and I think they've added a second position since then. We approached both of them as well as Miriam and asked if they had the capacity to sort of take on our work, and none of them did at the time. But as we've talked to them, it's really not uncommon to have kind of that hybrid. So even the people with in-house staff are having to supplement both plan review and inspection services in some other fashion.
And when we compare ourselves to other jurisdictions, we're kind of an interesting case study because we're a smaller population, but we have a really strong commercial base. So we have a lot of more activity than, say, Overland Park might have, or even Fern Village. And
For a
some-
small town, we do a lot of
we
activity.
do a lot of activity.
So you said, Brian, that it would be hard to find one person that had all of the credentials they would need to cover that umbrella.
Experience both the residential and commercial, right?
But is it even feasible to find a couple people that would work part-time type situations where they could,
It depends on what
this
we
guy's got certain credentials, he's got certain, or she has certain credentials. Between the two of them, you get things covered, but they're two part-timers instead of a full-time position.
It's possible. I think there's enough work there. Might keep one full-time person busy. And I could see probably hiring somebody more on the residential side and then supplementing the commercial side with kind of third-party agency like an IBTS or another city, Local Park. And it might become a training opportunity for that person that we do hire to get some experience in the area where they're lacking.
To credential up.
Yeah, exactly.
Do we have costs on IBTS and what they provide? And
Well, we've been
So we,
working through their billing,
yeah, it's been a transition because they bill differently than we've been doing these things in the past. So we kind of have this basket of apples and oranges, and they haven't done enough work with us yet for us to really have a clean set of comparables. But my feeling is that it's probably long-term not as good a deal as doing something else. They're set up to do what they do, and they're kind of more focused on jurisdictions that haven't done a whole lot of code, building code before, so they're kind of more of a base level. We're kind of maybe beyond them already, but they were available when we needed them in an emergency to transition, so that's something we keep an eye on.
So do you need any kind of, I mean, not at this point, but is this something that's going to eventually need some kind of city council approval and
We wind up
create a
actually,
new position?
exactly, we'll have to amend the budget sometime.
So what's the next step? Where are we at?
I think probably the next step is to continue conversations with Overland Park and then to put together an ad, put that in the paper and solicit, see what kind of interest we get in the position.
Okay. Then you'll be coming back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Questions?
Good idea.
And we know there's enough level of interest in our fee generation for Overland Park to still be talking to us, because they're not gonna do it for free, so we've given them enough data that,
And frankly, they were going to hire an additional person. That was kind of, their win out of it was they were going to actually staff up again and hire somebody that kind of split between us and them. So, I have a feeling though, we'd probably be better off in the long run to have our own staff person.
Yeah, we'd be second fiddle on that guy, yeah. He'd be taking care of all the OP stuff first.
Last, we have department updates.
and I know Christy and Danielle both have things. John, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to update. Okay, Christy, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Senate Bill 70 that came out of the Capitol this year. It's also known as the amusement park bill, so I think you're familiar with that. Of course, it relates back to the accident that happened at Schlitterbahn last year. And it will require us, we're going to have to start having water slides, our water slides at both of our pools inspected on an annual basis, and then it's also going to require inspection of any inflatables that we would use also. They have not determined how. They're looking at, what the legislature's looking at right now is that if your facility has been, as far as water slides go, if you have been built to code, and you have engineered stamped plans, which of course we do, then you will be able to have either a playground safety inspector, which we have on staff, or an aquatic facility operator, which we have on staff, go through their annual checklist. And that will be the extent of the inspection for those water slides.
that goes back to the state or to the county?
It'll go back to the state. So there's that, and then as far as inflatables go, and if they're talking specifically anything outdoors, because of all of those inflatables that have taken taken off and flown away in the past.
Oh, yeah.
The best recommendation they can give is if you own an inflatable that you use outdoors, sell it and start renting it, because the responsibility of inspection and liability will go back to the owner. So fortunately to say, all of those that we use outside, we do rent. So just to give you an update on where we're at on both of those. As far as the amusement park, the water slides, since they don't have an inspection form or anything out yet, they said go ahead and open and continue operating as usual until we hear more from them. So that's where they're at. And then the last,
This bill has passed.
it has
And
passed.
signed by the government.
Yes.
What's the effect of it?
Usually it's July 1st.
Yeah. So, we'll double check on that. But yeah, they're still trying to, there's a couple things that they're trying to wrap up on that. I forget. I know one of them, you can be 15 years old and be a non-certified lifeguard. You just be a 15-year-old regular person, don't have to be certified lifeguard, to work at the top of the slide to dispatch riders. That's because all you have to do is be able to measure, make sure they meet appropriate height, and then to be able to look at the bottom of the slide, see that the area is clear, and be able to dispatch somebody down. So the way the bill was originally written was that they were going to put some of the responsibility back onto the people at the top of the slide. Fortunately, through the Kansas Recreational Park Association, their legislative committee, they were able to work with the legislators and the members of that committee and say, now, wait a minute, we're looking at 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, and do we really want them to have that responsibility? So then that came back. And then, again, what are the specific things we're looking for in the inspection? So that is out there. And then just the last thing, I don't know if any of you have had an opportunity to make it by the community center to look at the Rushton art that is hanging in the hallway, but that went up, it'll be 2 weeks ago this Friday. We have almost 350 pieces of art from the Rushton kids up there, and we are getting tons and tons and tons of compliments on that, and people coming in all the time, kids are dragging their parents down the hallway, look, mine's down there, and so it's really neat and something we'll definitely expand upon for next year. So it does come down tomorrow, so tomorrow's Thursday, yeah, before.
I thought we were leaving that till Friday, because that's when we take the bikes down.
Yeah, she needs to take them down on Thursday, something about needing to, because the way school is ending,
Oh, okay.
wants to get them in their backpacks to go
Okay.
home on Friday.
Okay, so the bikes will stay on till Friday.
Yes.
Chrissy, I was out of town, but how'd the Arbor Day thing go in the park?
Yeah, I was out of town too.
Ask the mayor, he was there. I was in
Yeah,
the
well-
library.
It
Went
did
well.
get rained out.
Did get
Yeah,
rained
it got
out.
rained out, the first part of it, but had it in the library. And then we went down to the park after lunch. So they did get to go in the park and hang all their little stuff up on the trees. I'm sure you saw that, Pat,
Oh, yeah.
from your hot tub. But no, it went well. It's always a good event. Second graders.
I forgot to bring your flag back, but
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I called Susie on this after I got back. I went to do a park visit the other day to Mohawk Park and witnessed that they only had, I had my grandson, and it was a time I guess kids were getting out of school. They had one park bench and 5 families were there trying to put stuff on top. They had no room for anything. Everything was strung on the ground. So that was one, and then the trash cans are all rusted out. So I talked to Mark and the park board, and he said, I'm glad you mentioned that because we're going to go do an assessment of all the parks and the inventory. And that was like 2.5 weeks ago. Just wondered if anything had come back, because for the trash can painting, I thought one thing would be really cool if we got them painted. The kids at summer camp could even paint mission logos and flowers and stuff on them.
I think that's a great idea. Well, just for a point of clarification, for Mark, he was not at our last meeting, so we aren't going to do an assessment. That was actually done through the master plan process. The consultants did that for us. Actually, in our next Park Recreation and Tree Commission meeting, we will be, they went home from the last meeting with a list of what we would consider minimum minimum site standards and minimum site amenities. And so we're going to compile that list at our next meeting and saying, okay, we believe we should have X number of trash, recycle receptacles, doggy bag, providers, picnic tables, park benches, and then what should those look like? So that's where we are at in the process of that. And yeah, I think we could probably do something to make our trash cans look better, because we aren't going to replace those immediately. I think once we come up with those, what are the minimum standards and what are those going to look like, and who are we going to get those from, and we make sure we have them budgeted and we get them purchased. In the meantime, I'm sure we can do something to make those look better.
And it's May, I mean, when could we do it? I would even help if there's something we need to help.
Summer camp starts the first week of June,
Well,
so.
I think I would support the idea of the kids going and painting that, as long as they stop over at Johnson Drive and Broadmoor and paint the stop sign pole.
Now,
But we actually
we
need,
take the trash
we need
cans
to
to
get,
Stop
kids.
labels.
we really probably just need to get rid of those trash cans and there's some of them are so rusted.
Yeah.
And I mean, we gotta look at legally liability on the city for them painting and anything, fumes and all that stuff. But I thought, that's a neat way, it puts a mark on the city with the kids involved, and the kids use the parks. And I thought, that would be a great idea. And that doesn't seem to be a real costly issue. So I would, and this is one of those things that I totally understand comprehensive plans and all that. Some of the stuff just needs the mom and pop approach, say, it looks bad, let's do something, and find the money to do it.
Well, didn't we discuss putting extra tables and chairs, tables and trash cans and stuff at the parks a couple of years ago? And wasn't that on one of our plans? And we have not done that at Mohawk.
Not formally, it never made it onto a plan formally. We argued about what ought to be where for a while, because with our last kind of citizen committee, but.
There's been no implementation at this time.
I know, let's
No
go.
formal
Yes.
plan to implement. So, but yeah, the Parks Recreation Tree Commission is moving kind of fast forward through some of those things so that we can get items implemented this year and definitely have a plan for next year.
Okay, are they asking for input from the public, because what things they may use, or are they doing it kind of?
Well, I think we have 13 members on that commission right now, and they really are kind of the representing the individuals in the community, and then that recommendation, of course, will come to you for final approval, but I think they're...
See, that's what I want to get away from, going through all these late, I just want to get it done.
Yes,
They look horrible.
Yes, we'll deal with the, yes. We will move that discussion from the master plan forward, but we'll figure out what we can do to make the trash cans look better.
Can we just have another tape? Can we not afford another? We only got one up there, and I have a big picnic up there.
We've got some money, we can do that.
Thank you.
But the thing is, well, yeah, we'll take care of it.
It's a strange table, because there's no shelter, and that
No,
picnic
it's like,
table
well, are
has
we
like,
going to build a shelter, and are we going to put
Yeah.
the picnic tables in a shelter? Well, where's the shelter going to go? Or are you just going to put tables
I
out
bet
there
we can
without
figure
any
that
type of cover?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'll go to do it.
Well, I'll paint. I'll paint. We'll have to that one.
good deal. We'll make something happen for you.
Danielle.
So a little bit of permit activity to share with you. We got another application in this week for a new home. There's a tear down on the north end of Riggs, 5120 Riggs. There's a 1940s bungalow there, I think. And the current owners are having it demolished and building a new home. I hear that they live overseas, so I'm not exactly sure who's going to inhabit the home once it's purchased or constructed. But going to a 1,300 square foot, reverse 1.5 story. And they're reporting the initial value of construction at about $250,000. So.
Nice.
That's
I like that.
Good job.
And then I guess I will share the Highlands neighborhood cleanups this weekend. Dumpsters are getting dropped in the neighborhood on Friday, and then the neighborhood will have Saturday set hours with some volunteers from Christchurch, right?
I think we've got 40, I think. James emailed me, I think there's 40 volunteers.
To dispose of household waste and yard waste, and then we do have actually some junk collectors who will go through the things being discarded and divert as much as possible to another use or to scrap.
How many teardowns do we have in our city compared to
Not as many as Roland Park's experiencing,
Park.
yeah. Really?
Prairie Hills are tearing everything
Yeah.
down?
Well, isn't Stars being torn down too
Uh,
in Countryside?
we don't know yet. I think it's being purchased and they're exploring what to do with it. So we could have another tear down. Typically, we get one new home a year anywhere, and so some of them are tear downs, some of them are lots that were bigger that were subdivided to allow for another house. So with one house a year, we're not seeing a huge spike in the new home building either way. But, like I say, we're not watching.
One other public works issue, John traveled south on Lamar today, between 65th and 66th and Lamar going south, with two big potholes on the west side.
I'll be happy to report, that's over on the park side, but I don't know about the
No, that's Millhaven.
On Lamar?
On which side of the street?
South?
The east or
Side,
west?
west side.
It's heading south, so it's on the west side.
That's over the park.
Yeah, that's over.
We have one lane and they have another.
Same thing with 67th Street.
Border wars, border wars.
But I will let them know,
Please do.
I
absolutely.
drive over those potholes every night when I go home. Yeah.
Can I mention something about Public Works? Since most of you were here for the Johnson Drive redevelopment, we interviewed Cumulus today, radio station for a magazine article. Who's the guy we talked to, Ron?
Chuck Massey.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nasty.
So he's going to be on our front cover of the next magazine.
But he
But
lives in Mission, right?
he lives in
Yeah.
Mission.
He's a Mission resident,
He
yeah.
lives in Mission. But I'll tell you, those people up there love Mission. They love Johnson Drive. You would not believe how wonderful they spoke about Johnson Drive. They kept saying, you
Which
guys,
people, Susie?
huh?
Which people?
Up at Cumulus. Oh, it's Cumulus. And I mean,
Online person, or on-air personality.
yeah, but I mean, even Chuck was just raving about it. He said, first you tore up Martway, and Johnson Drive was terrible, and then he says, and then you fixed Johnson Drive, and he says, I just want to tell you, Johnson Drive, our mission's a place to be. Johnson Drive is awesome. We've got new businesses. Go ahead, Ron. He was just going on and on and on and on. It was just hilarious. And the guy we talked to today was just another, he was just so excited about Johnson Drive. So I'm just passing on the compliments I'm getting. It's fun.
Who'd you talk to today?
Jeremy Snyder.
Snyder. And Chuck Massey is the on-air personality from 7 to midnight at 101 Fox.
He's a character.
Yeah.
We're trying to interview both the radio stations, so. And we do have a tour coming up at Cumulus. They're going to give us a tour. But it's really amazing up there. It's really fun. But, I mean, you should have heard the compliments. We didn't even ask. They just started saying this and this and this and this. And Ron wanted to see the process for the Mission magazine, so he's kind of trailing me. And he was kind of surprised I didn't even think about it all. I mean, it's just amazing how they feel about Mission. They love it.
I do too.
So kudos to the group that helped get Johnson Drive redeveloped.
That it?
I think that's all we have.
All right, well, this will commence the Finance Administration Committee. The first item is the results of the 2016 audit. Brian?
Okay, well, by state statutes, every year we have to do an audit of our books. And we have completed that. We got started in January. The auditors came in December, did an initial field test of the work. And then they came back at the beginning of February and did their full-blown year audit, reviewing all our files and asking us lots of questions and so forth. So we were able to get the audit done right behind us, done by early March, and then we're after hands by late March. We have Jonathan Marnsberry here with us tonight. He's the auditor. I'm going to ask him to come up and present the audit to you.
Jonathan, how are you? I'll take these.
Okay.
I can see his hand up with
And I think you've got these letters, both of these letters in your packet as well.
I trust you.
All right.
Sure. Probably. Sure, I will.
I'll take it. I like to read it. This is the second one. There's two extras.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I should have made the first one.
All right. Maybe introduce yourself again, who you're with.
Yes, that's all.
Please. Okay.
Yes. Yep, I'm Jonathan Nybarger with Meishauser and Company, and I was the auditor in charge of the 2016 audit. I'm here to briefly go over the financial statements with you and answer any questions that you can have. Starting off, I was going to first start off in the financial statement, the down booklet that everybody should have. Pages 1 and 2 of the financial statement are the auditor's report. And the auditor's report includes standards that we use for the audit, and most importantly, the opinion that we issued. The opinion can be found in the last paragraph of the first page. And we issued an unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion the city can receive. And I wanted to also just scoot back to the page right before the auditor's report, and that is the 2015 Certificate of Achievement in Excellence in Financial Reporting that is issued by the Government Finance Officers Association. And both the certificate and the unmodified opinion, I feel like, speak very highly on the financial management of the city. Then the next section to the financial statements is the management's discussion and analysis, which is on pages 3 through 8. This section provides various changes and discussion of the major changes in the city during the year. Next is the statement of net position, which is on page 9. And this shows the assets and liabilities for the city during the year. And this is followed by the statement of activities, which shows the total revenues and expenses for the city during the year. The next section in the financial statements are the governmental funds, which show a breakdown for each budgeted fund. And it starts with the major funds. And this section for each budgeted fund shows the GAAP basis, the adjustments to get to the regulatory basis, and then the budgeted amounts, and then a comparison between the regulatory basis of the county and the budgeted amounts in the final column. Next is the notes of the financial statements, which are on pages 19 through 54, and the notes include information over the city's accounting policies, employee benefits, long-term debt, and capital assets. The first area that I like to point out is on capital assets, which was on page 29. The major sources of the additions this year were due to sidewalk improvements, police vehicles that were purchased, and other various equipment purchases. And then on the following page is a schedule of debt. This schedule had one major increase this year, which was a capital lease. And this was due to the police vehicles, the capital lease that was purchased, as well as the major decrease was just due to continued retirement and payment, scheduled payment of debt that was made. So in total, there was a decrease in debt. And then starting on page 40 is a new section regarding tax abatements. The city adopted the GASB 77 this year as a required disclosure that had to be implemented. And what this relates to is tax abatement agreements that the GASB felt necessary to disclose foregone tax revenue that the city experiences in those agreements. And Brian worked extensively to prepare this note for the financial statements this year. Following the notes are the non-major funds, and this just shows the remaining funds for the city. For each budgeted fund, there's the GAAP basis, the adjustments to get to the regulatory basis and the regulatory basis, the budgeted amounts, and then the variance column. And then following the non-major funds, starting on page 63 is the statistical section. And this section just includes various financial data for the city over a 10-year period. Then, separate from the financial statements, we issued a couple letters The first letter that I wanted to address was the auditor's communication letter to those charged with governance. And this letter includes various areas of standard required language that we issue every year, but I wanted to point out 2 areas in this letter. The first being the part that talks about corrected misstatements, and what these are relate to various entries that are necessary to be made for financial statement presentation. There were a couple that were made on the regulatory basis of accounting, which were to record capital leases and the expense for those. And the other was to show land that was donated to the city and to show that contribution. And then the remaining entries that were made were due to the city keeping their books on the regulatory basis and the financial statements being presented on the GAAP basis, and just those accrual entries to show the GAAP basis of the financial statements. And then the other part that I'd like to point out in that letter are the 2 areas that discuss any significant difficulties that were encountered during the audit, and we did not encounter any during the audit or experience any difficulties in dealing with management during the audit. And then the other letter that we issued was the auditor's recommendation letter. And in this letter, we identified a couple areas where we felt the city could strengthen internal controls. The first was over purchasing cards, which was a continued comment from last year. And the other was relating to the journal entry review process, which was a new recommendation this year. What we had seen previously was a log of journal entries that the city maintained and signatures or initials of those being reviewed, including supporting documentation for journal entries. And we did not see that in 2016, that review process that had been completed. Although supporting documentation had been maintained for journal entries, and journal entries were being approved, some individually, that log was not being maintained to show that all journal entries were being approved. And so we felt like we should make the recommendation to ensure that all journal entries are being approved. And we discussed that with Debbie and Brian during our final review meeting, and they have implemented additional procedures to ensure that, and a log of journal entries to ensure that those are being reviewed. And I would not expect this to be a recommendation in the future if that log is continued to be maintained throughout the year.
What percentage of the reviewed items were not approved?
I unfortunately don't know that off the top of my head. I'd have to try to look and get back to you on that.
What level of approval are you recommending?
What we like to see is somebody independent from the journal entry. And so I think what we're typically seeing on the process that's now being completed is that Brian is probably reviewing most of the journal entries that are completed. And I feel that that's sufficient.
So are you saying, is Debbie making the entries as the accountant?
Debbie or Arlo.
Okay. And then there's one step above them.
Right.
As far as the legal process.
So it's kind of an evolving process. When I came here, we had a journal entry that just simply said journal entry and a bunch of lines. And I would be kind of frustrated looking through journal entries and saying, well, who did this and why? So I beefed up the form a little bit to put an approval. Who did it? A. B. Who reviewed it and approved it. And then down at the bottom, the notation of why we're doing this journal entry. A lot of the journal entries that Jonathan was speaking to are really routine journal entries. We're recording payments we've made to utility companies for monthly billings. We're just doing those as ACH transfers. We're not even cutting a check to utility companies and taking out our paying. Then we do a journal to record that. And admittedly, we probably got a little sloppy saying it's so routine. We're not really reviewing that like we should be. So that's part of that log process now that Jonathan's talking about. We're reporting those, and then we're putting them into that log. And one of us is reviewing that log. So.
Well, and the log, as I recall, was something that you all recommended to us a year, maybe 2 years ago. And I always considered it almost like that table of contents. So you may have had the journal entry, and as you said, the supporting documentation was there. The process had been followed. It just wasn't making it up to that sort of cover log where you could just take a quick look at all those transactions.
Jonathan, you mentioned a couple of misstatements, and both of them sounded like non-routine kind of things, donated land and capital leases. They didn't fall on the material threshold to really put into the report. What is your material threshold?
How it works is it basically varies on kind of the area that we're looking at. So if we're looking on the statement of net position and activities, it's a much higher threshold than when we're looking on the individual fund basis. And so for each individual major fund, we have a materiality threshold. We have a threshold for the statement of net position and statement of activities in total that includes more for capital assets that are only being booked at that level. And then we have another one for just the non-major funds. I honestly couldn't remember the specific dollar amount off the top of my head, but I could communicate that with you. Okay.
How many cities do you audit?
Our firm, I think we audit somewhere around 30 to 40 cities.
Are we the most organized and best?
You're right up there.
And you might comment, because I know last year we'd been through a lot of transition, turnover in staff, and there were quite a few things. And can you talk about what you saw in terms of?
Yeah, there was one other area that I wanted to note was a letter that we issued last year, which was the auditor's letter on significant deficiencies. And this letter included a recommendation or a deficiency that we had noted where bank reconciliations were not being completed timely and accurately. And what we noted this year was that process was implemented. They were being reconciled between the bank statements and the general ledger. And I think that primarily probably Debbie Arla, who is working on that, is doing that consistently and accurately.
Do you ever go back, if you had a deficiency in 1 year, is there anywhere in writing the next year that says whether that's been?
Unfortunately, not really. It's just the absence of that letter that we have this year. We had that as a recommendation last year, or a deficiency that we noted, and we don't anymore. And that's because we were able to view sufficient evidence that process has been implemented, and we don't have that concern anymore.
What was your position on the engagement? Are you manager of your job, or?
Yes, I would.
Did you do the audit last year?
Yes.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
I will just say, I know that Jonathan touched on it and Brian spent a tremendous amount of time, but on page 40, the section on the tax abatements, it is one of the best summaries of the projects and the development projects and how we have used TIF or CIDs. So I would encourage you, if you didn't in your packet on Friday, take a look at that, because I think this is going to be a really good reference tool for us going forward.
Many of the items, I believe, that you covered tonight are required under Gatsby something. So this is a requirement for them to report back to the Board of Government.
That's correct. There's a group called the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and they put out kind of the guidelines and the edicts, if you will, for financial reporting for local governments. And they roll out these statements. And this is what you ought to be doing. The tax abatement footnote in statement 77, and when I read that, I just about fell out of my chair. Really, you need all that information? And Jonathan shared a sample list from Lawrence, which I think was a little light on the meeting requirements of Gatsby. So I just rolled up my sleeves and dug in and went point by point through it.
Very information. All right, any other questions? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, we have a recommendation to take.
So recommended.
Consent?
Well, I'd like to bring up the fact that it's very efficient, if possible, and I think the city's done an amazing job.
You can flower that speech up really well.
Pardon me?
You can flower that speech up really well. I guess we're real good.
So it's not consent?
That's right.
Okay. All right, next item is the Kansas Eastern Regional Insurance Trust. Scott Distributing.
We belong belong to the Kansas Eastern Regional Insurance Trust. It's a CARET, it's more affectionately known. And that's a group that was formed back almost 30 years ago, 1996. And it was formed for the purpose of providing workers' compensation insurance to the member entities. All the member entities are local governments. The Johnson County Parks and Recreation Commission, I think, is probably the only non-city, but still local government that's actually a member. Some counties too. We joined in 2009, and I think our relationship with them has been a good one. They have a board of trustees. So each member entity is allowed to appoint someone representative to be on the board of trustees. The board of trustees meets about every other month to conduct business. They really have no formal staff. They have administrative services that are provided by the Mid-American Regional Council, and then Thomas McGee, which is a local company here in Kansas City, insurance company, provides the third-party administrative services for claims processing, kind of the managing of the funds and so forth, and making sure we're compliant with the insurance laws and all of that. The board kind of undertook it about a year ago to review the bylaws. I don't think they've really looked at their bylaws since about the time they formed. And like any organization over the years, they run into little things here and there and say, whenever we review the bylaws, we ought to think about that. So they had enough of those, they decided to go through and review the bylaws. I neglected to put in a red line version of what they did, so I apologize. I will do that with the city council packet when that's sent out. There were not too many significant changes, but I will kind of take you through some of those in the documents that you have before you. There's several sections. It's a trust agreement that includes bylaws, operating procedures, under the operating procedures, there's a number of policies regarding assessment formulas. If there's ever an assessment that's in place against the members because the trust is short of money in a particular claim year, code of ethics, a dividend formula for returning money once a claim year is actually closed out. You'll recall that when I present premiums to you all in December, I'll mention that there's been a claim year that's been closed out and we actually got the remainder of the premiums back. The last couple of years, that's been about $9,000. Investment policy and performance policy. So, under the bylaws, Article 2, they provide some definitions. That's all new. Trust, member participant, board trustees, administrator, etc. Section 4 of the bylaws is page 3. Trustee or alternate trust shall not be paid compensation for their services, so we're not getting any money to serve as a member of the board of trustees. Section 5, and this is kind of important, on page 4, there's 4 new subsections, D, E, F, G. D states, these are members, participants may be expelled from the trust by the board of trustees for the following. And they've kind of beefed up this section by adding these last 4. Failure to continue to meet membership criteria specified in the operating procedures. Failure to meet underwriting criteria. Failure to participate in the safety loss prevention programs or claim management program in order to carry out the purpose for which the trust was established, or upon termination by the board of trustees as authorized under the trust agreement, including but not limited to section 5.3 of the agreement trust, blah, 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 blah. And then further down that page in section 6 is provisions for actual termination of membership. It seems a little onerous, but the board of trustees is very concerned about everybody kind of towing the line, if you will, in terms of safety of the employees that they work for organizations, and making sure that we're doing everything we can to try to reduce claims, and thus for the health of the organization, for the health of all the member entities.
Is there a list of members?
How many members are there?
There is in the packet, I think the cover packet is
In the action item summary,
Yeah.
there's a list of the 18 entities that are members of
Yeah.
CARET.
It's, locally it's Fairway, Shawnee, Leawood, there's some outlying communities, Lansing, Leavenworth, Chanute, McPherson. Yeah.
Yeah, that stretches that eastern, the E and the CARET a little
Yeah.
far, but, and honestly, just some of the history since we were on in the last probably 4 or 5 years, they've been more aggressive in marketing to new member communities. And yours truly raised a question at one point saying, if we have a set of criteria by which we're evaluating potential new members, are we not applying that same set of criteria to our existing members about whether or not they can continue to be members of the trust? I mean, once you're in, it shouldn't just be an automatic deal. Do we have performance standards? And it's been
That's where some
slow,
of those changes came from.
slow coming, but that's part of
Yeah.
where some of this had come from, because I think it was important.
Yeah. So that's a lot of, kind of the meat of it will be on is clarifications and some legal language. The operating procedures provides a little better description of the trustee section, the process for trustees and alternate trustees, and appointing those individuals as well as electing officers to the board of trustees.
I'd say after that presentation, I can't do anything except recommend to take that.
And I would say the more exciting part, I mean, I know these things are awful, but, you know, when we joined CARET in 2009, we were previously with KMIT, which was the Kansas Municipal Insurance Trust, which covers a lot of cities throughout the state. And what we were paying in premium the last year we were with KMIT was about $122,000. And our average premium has been below $90,000 every year since we've been with CARET. So it has, over the 9 years that we've
Is that
been with them.
after the kickback, or I mean,
So we've saved probably somewhere between $250,000 and $275,000 over the last 9 years by making that change, and I think quite honestly get better service than we did from KMIT.
All right, we have a recommendation, consent. Agenda.
yeah.
We don't need to follow this one up.
Deflower.
Next item is the network and firewall server replacements.
Okay. Downstairs in the police department, we have a small room, probably smaller than these 4 tables put together, and that is our server room. And that's basically where all the server equipment for the city's network is located. It's kind of divided between the police department and the rest of the city. And the reason for that is because the police department has a lot of sensitive information on their servers. And so there's specifications from the Kansas Bureau of Investigation as to how that information is handled and treated. And that's the reason why I have a firewall. That firewall kind of separates the two sides and provides a little bit of a deterrent for anybody from the outside trying to get into the business side of information. Those servers are kind of nearing the end of their useful life. They're supported by Johnson County Department of Technology and Information. And they've done a good job with that, but the servers are nearing the end of their useful life. Some of the warranties on software are coming to an end. And so it's suggested to us that we go ahead and replace the servers. I asked for a quote. The initial quote they gave me was almost $50,000, probably $55,000 for the two. I'm interested in getting this going. It's an important project for us, but I did kind of push back a little bit on them. You kind of help explain why so much, because that is a lot for servers.
When you said you asked for a quote, was it from Johnson County?
I asked them to get a quote from them. They're familiar with the specifications that we need. So they reached out to Hewlett Packard. They looked at that quote again a little bit further, and they realized there's things on there like there's 2 licenses for virtual management software of the server, and that allows the software the capability to be able to do a number of things, both in virtual time and managing the server. And one license won't do for us, so that's about $5,000 right there off the top of the quote. They realize that the memory might be a little bit heavy, so they think they can back down the memory. And then they've reached out to another company they work with quite a bit to get a second quote. And they think the second quote, we haven't gotten that second quote back, firm quote from them, but it's more like in the ballpark of about $17,000 to $18,000. So that's probably more reasonable for
From the 56 down to 17?
17, 18,000 for each. So it'd be more like about 32,000, 50,000, 55,000.
Yeah, I think the software costs are pretty set. I don't think you can do much there, but I looked at just a couple of the components and did some quick math, and the RAM that's in there, there's 32 sticks of RAM between the two. They've got it listed at about $349 a piece. You can find them online. Here's some server supply, exact same part number, same manufacturer for $165. That's if you're buying one. If you're buying 30 plus, you're probably going to be better. So that right there is almost $6,000 savings just in that one part. So it definitely seemed like the price of some of these individual parts was pretty high.
Yeah,
Did you push back before or after Nick asked this question?
before.
Okay.
Um,
Nick brought-
I just grabbed three parts that stood out that seemed to be a little high. I didn't look at every single one, but I came up with just 5 minutes of doing a little searching about $9,800 in savings if we were to buy those parts just online from the individual person. I know we don't have staff to put that stuff together here or anything, but
Right, I reached out to them last week when I was preparing the packet item. I said, can you just kind of explain to me again why these prices are so high?
yeah,
And that's when they kind of said, well, we're doing a little bit more research, that may not quite be it. Okay, I need to get this going.
and do we know, I know this was kind of talked about before, but if Johnson County is using these guys, you think they're paying attention to this either? Or? I don't know.
Well, if Johnson County isn't looking out for our best interests, that kind of scares me a little bit since they are our IT provider. And if we can't trust them to work for the greater public good of the ratepayers, taxpayers, then we need to be careful because this is a very inflated project. And maybe they don't care if it's not them, but we're serving the same people. So I'm disappointed that they would.
Well, and Johnson County has servers and
Right.
IT stuff
They should.
too, so I'm sure they're getting bids from the same people.
I guess we should.
End of the day, that's our money
Yeah.
too.
But I think we should communicate to Johnson County that we're disappointed that they would pass that on to us, since we're relying on their expertise to provide the service.
I will tell you that the reduced quote of about 17,000 and some change came through at just after 4 o'clock today, which is why that's when it came across my desk. Brian and I did talk about it. The reason why it's still before you today, I know there's a difference between 34 and 17,000. The server for the police department side, we have 2 downstairs. This one runs all of our Citrix, the Laserfish, which we scan everything into the system, the price card system. Captain Malloy's reported to me that recently, over the last several months, this system has had to be rebooted. So if the system doesn't reboot, then that means that all of the doors for the police station and City Hall go open 24 hours a day, and we have to staff somebody and come to you in an emergency, which is why it's still before you. That 17,000 some change quote is not a vetted quote yet, and Johnson County DTI even told us that today. They're still trying to spec that out. But we wanted to still bring it before you today because if that system does go down, then we're going to have a problem downstairs. And, I don't like having problems. So.
And we should have noted that in the action item summary, that we were still researching that, so lesson learned on that one for us, certainly.
It's part of a larger infrastructure project that we're initiating this summer with a new phone system, security cameras.
I think the equipment's
wires in the buildings.
I think the equipment's a good investment. I'm just looking at this specific bid that we got on the equipment. It seems kind of outrageous.
You work with that,
So between now and the council meeting, this will be.
We'll sort that out.
Revised action or something like that. Let's see. Any other questions on this recommendation?
Take it.
Well, will we have the actual numbers by then?
Yes.
That's what we just said.
Yeah, we'll have vetted out by then.
Consent?
Probably.
All right, item 4. It's the waiver of requirements of Chapter 205 for the fireworks.
No.
Every year, we need to waive the requirements so that we can have fireworks at Mission Summer Family Picnic, and Councilmember Crane always graciously agrees to purchase the fireworks, and our budget has been $600.
Yeah, because that ain't sufficient budget.
And then business puts in some at the end, and that's fine. My biggest concern in this whole thing is us driving back from the lake with all those fireworks. If somebody hit us or something, the whole car's going to go up.
We need to take 2 cars, let Lynn drive.
Thank you, Pat. 600 is fine.
Take it.
All right, consent? All right. We do have a discussion item. Item 5, the NCDB fund balance.
Thank you. So when we moved forward in January to eliminate the NCBB committee, we told you that because of statutory requirements for the transient guest tax, we do need to maintain a separate NCBB fund so those transient guest tax receipts can go into that fund. Right now, those transient guest tax receipts are used exclusively to cover the costs of production and mailing of the Mission magazine. And there's not much left over at the end of the year. We're seeing an uptick in those receipts, but that fund has also accounted for a variety of other expenses through the year. The special events, general committee expenses. We take in money and pay out money for the Mission Merchants Group now, the Mission Business Partnership, both their dues money and any sponsorship money that they have for the events that they put on. Their Arts Council previously had some money there, and then the annual holiday adoption program. What? The holiday adoption program? That's where it all flowed through.
Oh,
So
I was going to say.
revenues
yeah,
came in and
we didn't
expenses
pay
came out.
city.
Yep. And so what we said was, let's wait till we get through the audit, let's see what the audited fund balance of that fund is, and then let's connect the dots and figure out what truly is left over NCBB, which was that kind of special event pot of money. And that's the really confusing sheet on the back, probably the last page of your packet. So what this tells us and matches up, and it's a little hard to follow, so I apologize for that, but the MCBB event balance, when we look at, there are always, because of the Holiday Lights and Festive Sights event and the holiday adoptions, there are always a few carryover expenses that get paid early in 2017 that are actually for your 2016 programs. So when we look at all of that, the actual event balance coming out of or kind of available for repurpose or reuse is about $45,231. About, give or take. There's some rounding there, but, and so at one point we had talked about, the council had some very, I think, limited discussion about wanting to look at and consider using those funds to help continue to support the business community and other efforts. And so we just put together a couple of ideas for discussion. The first being preserving about $5,000 of that for event support for holiday lights and festive sites. So that is the one event that remains from those that the MCBB was previously doing. It will be moved and stay at the community center where it's been the last couple of years, but we didn't budget for that in the Parks and Recreation Department budget for 2017. So our recommendation is to preserve a portion of that to help cover any revenues over sponsorships or expenses over sponsorships that we're able to get. I think we won't even spend close to half of this if it's similar to last year's event. And then we can budget for that appropriately in the 2018 budget going forward. And we would return anything that we didn't spend back to this MCBB fund. The other thing that we talked about more specifically as we went through our discussion on the sign code, and we talked about when we were talking about amortizing pole signs, creating some sort of incentive pool to try to get pole signs down. We put this back out there, even though you didn't adopt the amortization piece. We thought, there could be some interest from people who have pole signs, and maybe it would be interesting to create an incentive pool and put it out there for a short time and see if we could get any of the other ones down that are currently up. So we propose setting aside about $15,000. If that's something you're interested in, we can put some better structure around that and bring that back to you. And then preserving about $25,000 for other business support. And I think we didn't get any more specific with the recommendations, because I think it's important for us to try to initiate some conversations with the business community about what would be valuable to them. There's no point in creating a program that they don't perceive as having any value to them. I know we have a meeting tomorrow with Mission Business Partnership to talk about a sunflower festival that they're trying to kick off and what our role there might be. There are all kinds of promotional opportunities. There are amenities that can be purchased. We can supplement the business improvement grant program. So we're really just looking for feedback, but I think we'd like to, for the lion's share of that money, go out and get some business input.
I will tell you that Nick and I will approach last night at the kickoff in the farmer's market. Someone has said that it would really be nice to have some seating outside along the business corridor for people to eat lunch. They don't always want to take their lunch and sit at their desk. They want to go outside, and there's not a lot of options for seating. So they could actually utilize the businesses, they get revenue, but there's really no place to sit. So that was brought up last night.
When pole signs, $15,000, how far would that go?
I think it would have to be limited to just cost to remove them, right?
I don't know how, it depends on the height, I'm sure, and everything else that goes with it, but $15,000, would that cover 2 pole signs, 1 sign? Would it cover?
Removal, I think.
Removal, I think you're about $3,000, right? Or 3 to 5.
3 to 5. It depends on how big the sign is and what kind of heavy equipment you use, but I think that amount probably would cover 3 signs. Just guessing of how big they might be. They might cover more if they're smaller and less difficult to remove. The bigger cost really is the replacement.
Is what?
Is replacement.
Yes.
So we've gotten some quotes for how much would a monument sign cost or the maximum size that we allow, and that's about $15,000 a sign. So truly removal, that was just the time and labor of the special equipment.
I like it. I like the idea.
Again, no action on this. This is a discussion and just try to have a general idea of what we want to do, and I'm sure more details will be brought forth, and we'll structure it more. And any other questions? All right. Do you have any departmental updates?
Ben, did you bring your sheet?
I got it all right here.
Okay. Just hit your calendar items for this week, and then we'll put the other things in the city administrator.
So tomorrow night, Citizens Academy graduates, and 2 of our council members in here are graduating, hopefully. We'd like to call it Bernadette tonight. So
What time is the graduation?
I believe it's at 6:30 tomorrow night. So, and then Friday morning is coffee and donuts, the usual monthly deal if you'd like to stop by and get some. And then next Thursday night, the 11th, is Dips and Sips with partners at the fire department. And free ice cream for everybody who comes by. We gave those flyers out to over 1,000 grade school kids to the chamber. I believe it's did or is going out on the city Facebook. We invited one of the local churches to come. So we're shooting for over 400 people to come out. As long as they climb in the fire truck
Like in the middle of the day
with their ice cream.
24,
It's from 5:30 at night to 7:30.
Oh.
So we'll see if we can't run them out of ice cream. So those are the events that are coming up over the next week. So.
I just want to do a shout out for Emily for the kickoff last night was amazing. And the idea to put those seats, those benches all along that sidewalk was absolutely amazing.
Brian's all over.
Wasn't it great?
Christy, staff, and John staff.
And I will tell you, it doesn't just impact the direct. The indirect, I went by Dips and Sips, and she said, you just don't know how much business we get as a result of this. So it just, one thing after another, moving in a positive direction. It was amazing. Get a lot of compliments.
Still like to consider doing something like that once a month through these summer months. I thought it was really good. I think we could actually build on the crowd that we had there last night.
How many people ran out of food? Just the barbecue? Or was it-
No, KCKS did and Winners did, and
I think the
grilled
cheese people did too.
ran out of bread, yep.
Bread.
Yep.
So you can get just a cheese.
She was serving the sandwiches on crackers by the end of the night.
Oh, that's great.
Yep.
Good job.
Good turnout.
Yeah. Good. What would we have to do to look into doing that? What did that cost us? Any clue, round numbers?
The outright costs of that really are musician costs and then staff time. Just my administrative time for the lead up and the promotion and kind of creating the buzz and organizing the volunteers and things like that. But we don't write a lot of checks for the, we don't pay the vendors anything to come. It's just music, entertainment, and
Music was good.
yeah.
It was great.
Yep. We started that discussion this morning about making it a more frequent event, so we'll bring back some.
Good. How far did you get there? Did you set any dates yet?
We did. Well, actually, we talked about an August date, or no, October date, at the kind of the conclusion of the market. So we're going to kick around some more ideas about
Good
that.
next time. Yeah.
And I was so happy you guys had the recycle bins out there. Good job.
All right, anything else? All right, that concludes the committee. Turn it over to the budget session.
Do we want to take a 2-minute break? Do we need to use the restroom? At least two? No, that's completely separate fund. So you have,
Let's see what I got here.
yours is a little bit more. You have, so what is this? Okay, so you really had, when we ended the year last year, what was this? I'm working on a request to the Community Foundation to reimburse us. That
Well, yeah,